Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ted Jones World podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. This gentleman I'm about to introduce is an ultra running legend. Just last week, he completed his 50th 100-mile race. Yes, you heard me correctly, 100 miles by foot. Everyone, please welcome Jeff Browning. Jeff, all the way from Arizona, man. How are you, dude?
I'm great, man. Good to be on.
So Jeff, I've gotten the running bug, I'd say probably over like the last 6 months, and just throughout my life, I've been an athlete. I played tennis at UConn, so running was always a big part of training, weight training and then running. But I'd say within like the last 3 or 4 years, I've actually kind of just gotten this newfound love for the run. And I just wanted to get you on here because what you've accomplished is amazing. So I guess we'll start off with that first question. How did you get the nickname Bronco Billy? And let's go from there, dude.
When I was first getting into the sport, I'd come from a climbing and cycling background, and I had a buddy from Wyoming that I used to climb with, and he had this kind of catchphrase he'd always say, "Giddy up," and it kind of stuck because we used it for everything. So, and I'd grown up on a farm in Missouri, and I moved to Denver, and we were climbing at the time, my wife and I, and we would always say stuff like, if you're about to make a move on a climb and you're like, you're belaying someone, you'd be like, "Giddy up," And so I was in the habit of using that from the climbing days. We're using the word giddy up. And my first friend in ultra running, one of my first friends, he was kind of a mentor, this guy, Jason Moyer, claimed to be from a direct descendant of the Berserker tribe, right? So he claimed to be a Viking, and he is very Viking looking, big red goatee and blondish hair. But I used to call him Berserker, and because I was yelling "giddy up" all the time and that kind of stuff, when we were like stoked, he started calling me Bronco Billy. I don't know where he got it. He just started calling me that. Like, I'd call him Berserker and he called me Bronco Billy, and I would say stuff like, "Get your battle axe, Berserker," and he would say that all the time. And then when blogs came around in like 2004, I was a graphic designer and a branding person. And I was like, okay, well, jeffbrowning.com wasn't available. And I wanted to write these blogs about my experiences in these long races and 100-mile races. My family in the Midwest was like, "What the heck are you doing? Doing 100-mile races." And so I was doing race reports, and those got really popular, but they didn't have, so Jeff Browning wasn't available. So I started looking at all these things, and I finally found Go Bronco Billy. I found Bronco Billy wasn't available, but I was like, oh, well, Go Bronco Billy. I wanted an action word. What if I couldn't run anymore? What if I can only bike? It couldn't be like Run Bronco Billy. Right. So that's where it came from. And then blogs got popular, and then I was a designer and in tech. And so I automatically, when smartphones came out, I was an early adopter of all the social media stuff. And so I got all the social media handles as well. And that's how Bronco Billy kind of took on it. And then after a while, man, some of the key people in our sport, which is a pretty small community, even extended across the West, they started calling me Bronco all the time. And so the nickname Bronco kind of stuck. People would hear people in the races, they wouldn't even call me by my real name. They just call me, they'd be like, "You're like, go Bronco," and stuff like that. So
do you think that's also like tapping into a different personality?
Well, this is a good question, because I love this question when you sent it to me, because I did. In the early days, I jokingly used it, right? But I didn't realize, now I've done a lot of mindset training, and as a coach, that's one of the things you're training ultra runners with, is mindset and like visualization and like that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize at the time, but that's really what I was doing. Inadvertently, I was like creating this alter ego that, I used to joke that like, okay, I don't let Bronco Billy out of the stable until the second half of the race, because he wants to race early, and you can't race
like mile 51 during those 100s, or I guess mile 121 when you do the MOAB 240.
Yeah, exactly. Don't let him out. Like, don't let him out of the stable. He's like stomping, chomping at the bit. He wants to go. And you're like, no, hold him back. So in the early days, it was kind of it was definitely a little bit of a joking alter ego. It was more for humor, but
Yeah.
then it became kind of a personality thing too,
Well,
I think.
before you ran that first 100-mile race, though, what was the most amount of miles that you had ran previously? Whether it was just like by yourself in Arizona or maybe like a 50-mile run. Was there a certain shift where you were like, well, 100 miles sounds crazy to everybody I know and anyone who I've ever talked about it, except for maybe some of these ultra runners. Like, when did 100
I,
miles become a possibility in your mind?
when my first friend, I moved to Bend, Oregon in 2000, and my first friend in town was an ultra runner, had just started dabbling in ultra marathons and had done marathons. And I had worked at a bike shop in college, a bike shop running shop. It was like the specialty running store in Columbia, Missouri, where I went to University of Missouri. And one of the things that the owner had run, he had run Boston like 25 times. So I always had this thing in my head, like someday I'll run a marathon, one of those kind of like, check it
You
off
mean just like the 26.2?
yeah, I had always said I was going to do that, but then I met this guy and he worked for the North Face at the time as a manager, and he had this video the North Face created in like 99, I think. 99 or 2000, I can't remember exact year, but it was this little documentary he had on VHS tape. And we would watch it. It was a documentary on Western States 100. And for me, I was like, whoa, what? People run 100 miles? I'm like, how many days? And he's like, no, dude, like sub 24 hours. And I was like, what? Through the night? And so something in me, I've always been a adventurous outdoor person, right? And something in me was like, I want to do that. I don't know what it was. And I thought at the time it was just like, hey, bucket list, check it off, go run 100 miles one time. But I started training and I realized that you couldn't get in that race. It was a lottery. So you had to have a 50 at the time. It's now 100K, but you had to have a 50-mile qualifier.
Is that kind of like the Barkley situation?
No, Barkley's even more crazy because you have to write an essay why you should be in the race.
Right.
There is no, like, he decides who's in. It's like a really fun. It's its own beast. It's not even in the same category as other ultras. And so it was just a lottery in November. And so I realized, like, well, I'd never even run a 50K at that point. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to run a 50 in 2001. I ran a marathon in fall of 2000, used that training to piggyback to a 50K trail race in February of 01. And then from there, I just ran like a couple 50Ks. Then I ran a 50 miler at the end of the summer to get my qualifier in August before the November lottery. And then that got me into Western States. I got in the lottery and ran my first 100 in 2002. So okay. I ran 50Ks, 50 milers, 100K. Yeah. I kind of did the stair step thing in training.
From the
so by the time I got 100, it wasn't that big a deal.
Sorry to interrupt again, but like the stair step thing, you'll hear people maybe who are just average everyday runners. They'll be like, all right, I want to run a half marathon, something in New York City. People want to run the Brooklyn half. And then I'd say over 50% of the people that run that Brooklyn half are like, I am never running that distance again. Then maybe the other 50% are like, all right, I want to run that, New York City marathon, the full marathon. Right. And it seems like the crowd just keeps getting narrower and narrower. It's like after your first 50K, was there a mindset where you were like, oh, dude, I'm cruising. Like, I want to keep running. I want to keep building. What was your mindset like after that first 50K?
I was hooked. I had come from mountain biking. I was a big mountain biker, and I kind of considered myself a cyclist more than I considered myself anything else, other sport. And that was my main sport. And then I climbed a little, I backpacked, and I did other things. But the simplicity of trail running and like light, fast, it kind of combined backpacking, running, cycling, and climbing into one discipline, where it's like light and fast. I can go summit that mountain and be back down for happy hour, right? And whereas we used to like, oh man, we'd have a big old pack on and we're slogging that thing out and it's an all-day event. You're like, oh yeah, I can go knock that out in 3 or 4 hours. And so I really loved the simplicity and like kind of it was just such a simple, clean sport that way, really light. And back then the gear wasn't even that light, but now it's super light. But it still was light compared to everything else. And I think that's what really drew me to the sport in the first place.
And it seems like nowadays you're running 100 miles a race like every 3 or 4 months. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's usually sandwiched into the season. So like this year, I've done 400s. I got 2 more to go. This is a project. I turned 52 next week,
Okay. Happy birthday.
and yeah, thanks. And so at the beginning of the season, when I was trying to turn in like what I was going to do for sponsors, I kind of have to turn in like at my tentative schedule for the year. I was going to run Cocodona 250 because I ran MOAB 240 last year. My wife was like, "You are so hammered after a 200-mile race." She's like, "I don't want you to do Cocodona this year." And so, knowing me, she just said, "You turn 52 this year, and you have 4,600-mile
You're getting
finishes."
younger. You're getting younger.
Yeah, and she's like, "You just need like 600-mile finishes to equal your age?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so I immediately, like an untrained hound dog, went on a different scent. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do 600s this year." Um, and so I decided to do 600-mile races to equal my age in
So like
finishes.
during a race like the Moab 240, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, 240-mile race in the basically desert. I'm gonna put the link to the video that I actually first discovered the beast that is Bronco Billy in this description right here. So check that out after you guys listen to this. But was there like during certain moments of this race, you're being filmed, you know that you're supposed to take a 30-minute nap every, bro, I don't know, what is it, every 20 hours? Is there like any part of you that is like, I cannot do this?
There was never a part of me that said I can't do it. There was a there was definitely challenges that were beyond the 100-mile distance. I mean, at that point, I
What's
was
something like that? Yeah.
very seasoned in the 100-mile distance. And I knew from coaching it, there's a lot of like, I knew some of the things to do to like minimize those mistakes. But if you make small mistakes on day one, they compound, and 48, 60 hours in, they
Yeah.
really, really catch up to you.
You
And
you talked about that. What's a small mistake though that can happen?
okay, I'll give you an example. It was really, really hot, and I chose to wear a micro wool sock instead of like a Cool Max sock, which then my feet, because wool, it does breathe. It is a good fiber, but it also insulates. I got heat rash on my feet, which then I had little heat blisters all over my feet.
And that and like on the bottom of your feet, is that what really is
No, it was like around my heel and kind of around on the top of the foot, like around the ankle and around your cuff of your shoe. So it's just super uncomfortable. And I had to like stop, and I had to doctor it and tape it. And had I just chosen a different sock, I probably would have been fine. So that was like a learning experience in that situation. It was like, well, yeah, little things make you catch up. And so, or like, for example, if you're starting to get a hot spot or something, and you would ignore it, right? And you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get it at the next aid station that's 10 miles away." No, you stop right there, sit on a rock, and take care of it. So little things, you don't let them fester in those races, because you're carrying like a little tiny blister kit with you in a Ziploc bag. It's like very bare minimum, and so you can actually take care of things on the fly.
You talk about the little mistakes. Do you have a certain diet before each race, like 24 hours out? Like I know that it's probably pretty specific the morning of the race, the night before the race, but is there like
Yeah.
week long where you have like a set amount of food, how many miles you're going to run since you've done it so
Yeah,
many?
we always 2-week taper, pretty much 10 days to 12 days. You're backing off on your volume 50 to 60%. And so you're peaking, 2 to, or basically 3 to 6 weeks out with a lot of volume. And then you taper that volume down by 50% the last 2 weeks. So you're really shutting it down to kind of bring around all that adaptation from the big block of training, because you have a bunch of cumulative fatigue that's covering up adaptation. And when you taper, that rest, that minimizing or less half the volume you're normally used to, all of a sudden, like all that strength and adaptation shows up. So that's one of the things you kind of typically do in long endurance stuff. But the other piece for me, diet wise, is kind of important, especially at my age. I had a pretty major shift in 2015. to more of an animal-based diet. So I'm pretty much, you know, I just concentrate on what animal proteins I'm taking in every day. And then I eat fruit and vegetables. So, and starches like potatoes. I don't do grains. I don't do sugar in everyday diet, or at least 90% of the time. Now, that leaves a couple meals a week to like let it loose and go have pizza and beer or something, but like one meal out or something. But, 90% of the time, I'm kind of really focused on an animal-based diet, kind of more paleo, but high protein. Protein's the focus. There's been a lot of studies in endurance sports, and high protein, 1.2 to 1.3. Yeah. 1.2 to 1.3 grams per pound of body weight.
Now, is there, let's say you wake up on a Wednesday, a day like in 2 days from now, you ran the 100-mile race last week. Is there a certain amount of miles that you will know to run in your head, or is it kind of more like how you feel each day?
Go by feel. You're going by feel. You're going by feel. I'm trying to get back to hour maintenance runs this week. So like I ran on Saturday. I ran yesterday like 35 minutes. And then I'll go run easy today and lift weights. I lift weights 3 days a week in the gym, full body. And I do mobility on those days too. So I'm doing mobility and strength in the gym together. I'm kind of doing them in tandem. So strength I immediately get back onto.
When you're running for an hour, what's your pace there?
Like conversational pace. So like whatever I could carry on a full conversation, full sentences. For me, that's about a nine something minute pace to be able to carry on a conversation. It can be down in the 8s, but most of the time it's 8-9 minute pace, somewhere in there.
What would be your advice for a person who is running, let's say, around like 20 miles per week? Is there a mix of the strength training and mobility that you need to implement? Is there like a certain speed that will be better for maintaining muscle? Because I know that people who, especially being in, I guess, a place like New York where people are at the gym together, people will see other people on runs, like in Arizona, when you're going on these long runs, maybe the only thing you're seeing is a bobcat in the distance, or,
Right.
You're not seeing like a lot of people. So I think that being in a place like, I've spent some time in LA, Miami, New York, people are really focused on being that hybrid athlete. Is there something that specific that people should focus on in terms of maintaining the muscle and then also maintaining your cardio fitness?
Yeah, strength, I would say, number one for longevity is strength training. Like if you can have a regular full body strength training routine that you can do in the gym 2 to 3 days a week. 3 days a week is probably ideal if you're doing full body. That way you just go get everything done. And even if you get busy, 2 or 3 days later, you go do the full body again and just hit the gym, 3 days a week, and then run. And then run whenever, if you can run 4 or 5 days a week, easy, 30, 20 to 40 minutes, that's kind of the ideal scenario for longevity. And then mixing in good real food, nutrition, I think is really important. I mean, if I were going to pick one thing, it would be strength training. And strength training and mobility goes with it, because when you're strength training, you're working on a full range of motion. You should be, at least, and concentrating on good movement patterns. I think some people get in the gym and just throw weights around. I'd rather see people slow down and like through the full range. So a lot of people, you'll see guys, muscle heads, like drop weight, but you get 70% of your strength gain
so annoying,
in lowering.
Yeah.
Yeah, they slam it down. It's like, dude, my first thing as a coach is like 70% of your strength gain is in the lowering of the weight. So people are giving up all their strength, a lot of their strength gains by dropping weights, by letting gravity do its thing. No, you need to control the weight. So if you're doing bench press or whatever, right, you should be controlling the weight on the way down, not dropping it on your chest.
Yeah. And then
right?
I heard you also talking about mobility and running these long races where maybe there'll be a drop and your body needs to adjust quickly to like that jerk of the motion, where like if you hadn't been doing mobility stuff and you're just running on a flat surface, that could be an issue where you'd get injured.
And that's where people as they age get injured, right? Because they go into a range of motion they're not used to. So if you trip and you go to catch yourself and you can't lunge, then you try to catch your body and you end up breaking a hip. right? Or a shoulder or something. Whereas if you've been doing mobility and you can go all the way down in full range of motion and your calf can touch your hamstring, right? I don't know if you're familiar with knees over toes guy, Ben Patrick, great mobility guy on like knee health and like jumping and keeping that movement pattern going. That's one of the motions I work on a lot in running, is that knees over toes. So it's like the deep forward lunge. He calls it the ATG split squat. And if you can't do an ATG split squat, you're going to go down. And it's the same in trail running. If you kick a rock or a root while you're running downhill and you go from running 10-minute pace to running 5-minute pace, trying and doing a Superman, trying not to face plant, you know, the guy who has good mobility is probably going to pull out of that. And the runner who hasn't been working on mobility and just goes out and runs every day is going to go down and eat dirt, right? So, and then get injured because you went down. So like it actually saves you, it lowers your risk too by focusing on that.
I want to talk about the MOAB 240. You ran that in, correct me if I'm wrong, 57 hours, correct?
57
and a little change.
27, I think.
But your naps and the amount of time that you're actually conscious, like, I know you change into Bronco Billy, but what does your mindset kind of look like after that first 100 miles? And is your team telling you, no, Jeff, you gotta nap here for 30 minutes, like you're ready to go? Do you kind of know, is it all based on feeling, kind of like how you were talking about?
Yeah, we had a general sleep plan, and then I was kind of by the seat of my pants on other, because it was my first 200 plus. Yeah. So I did, and in hindsight, there's other things that, like, I coach Mike McKnight, who's won a bunch of 200s, and Sarah Ostaszewski, who won Cocodona 250 for the women this year. And she just won URA 100. Like, both of them, we all trade notes because we're all racing up front. So we're all trying to fine tune, because 200s are so new. The original kind of thought pattern behind strategy for racing was like, go for 36 to 40 hours without sleeping, and then take naps, take a nap, and then take naps as needed, short little tiny naps to get to the finish line. But what we're finding is, actually, if you sleep on night one, most people skip night one. If you sleep a little on night one and trick your body and say, hey, we slept, even if it was only like 20 to 40 minutes, somewhere in that range, enough to trick the body in the middle of the night that, hey, we got sleep, and then you go back into the next day and you sleep one more time, and then you get in race mode.
Another 20 to 40 minutes slumber, you mean?
Yeah, something like another 20 to 40 minutes, up to an hour. I've had a couple athletes that are fast, like take an hour nap on night 2, and then that gets them through night 2, and then they hopefully are finishing on day 3. So that'll get them to day 3. So, and then if they can get in race mode the last 60 miles, if there's people around them in the, say they're racing for the win, that gets you, like, keeps you awake, because there's an adrenaline rush that goes along with the race mentality.
How delirious do you get during any of these races?
You can get really, like, okay, give you like a case study. Last year, I knew a guy who's a really, really good runner. He's got 150 ultra marathon finishes. He came to MOAB for his first 200, but he didn't have a very good sleep strategy. So he just tried to push through without hardly sleeping. He started hallucinating so bad, he thought he heard a woman screaming off the trail. And we have a spot tracker on. And so race headquarters, and there's a website, and everybody can.
Is that like an air tag so they know where you're at?
Yeah, so it's basically just a GPS tracker that's pinging a signal every like few minutes, and that way, and it's on a website, shows the course and shows where you are on the course. Yeah. Well, they knew, because of the spot tracker, he left the trail to go after this woman to help her. Okay, this is an imaginary woman. She does not exist. Okay, so he's off trail. They watch the spot tracker leave the course. So they send a volunteer, who is a medical person who was used to dealing with this, went out to find him. They found him, and he kept saying, "Do you hear her screaming? We've got to help her." Right? I mean, he's frantic. We have to help her. And the guy who was the volunteer was like, "We sent someone to get her. They were helping. We got to get you back on course." So they lead him back to course, get him to the next checkpoint, and they make him sleep for like 5 hours or something.
Did you remember that?
After the race, he was like still a little out of it. And we chatted and he was like, man, he goes, I have never experienced that before. He's like, he goes, after that, I didn't know when they made me sleep. And then I woke up and I realized how much I'd been hallucinating. He goes, from that point forward to the finish, he finished the race. But he was like, he still was like, wasn't sure what was reality and what was fake. Like if someone was talking to him, was he imagining it after that experience? He said it was real. Like it was a trip.
Yeah.
So
that's
crazy.
Something that's something that happens at, I'm sure, way less of a distance, especially for people.
Okay, let me give you one more example. This one's a good one because this guy right now is about to finish Tahoe 200. I have 4 athletes right now finishing Tahoe 200. One's finished, he got second. I got another one that's about in 20th, and he has a chance to like move up to 15th, but he's from the UK, Scott Jenkins. He would not mind me using his name. He's a great bro, and he went to MOAB for the first time. He's finished multiple 200s now, Cocodona, MOAB a couple times, but his first time before he had coaching, he just showed up to MOAB to go do it, and he didn't have any sleep strategy, so he didn't sleep. And he just kept pushing through. Finally, his wife, who's Scottish, is like super competitive. So she decides he gets to like mile 220 something. So he's got like 18 miles to go. He needs to sleep bad. At this point, he is strung out. He should sleep, but she pushes him out of there. He gets into still mode so bad that he thinks she's a witch.
No way. Are they still married, by the way?
They are.
Okay, good. She thinks she's a witch. We're done.
Yeah, well, she was like, what the? And she said she was running from her, yelling, I know who you are. You're a witch. And like, he's running and she's like, he's faster than I am. And I couldn't catch him even after 200 some miles. And so he finally goes into this big rock alcove, almost like a little cave on the right off the trail. And he won't come out. So she's standing there looking like on the trail, and a friend of mine from Logan, Utah, who I've known for a long time as a race director, he was running the race. This guy, Jason Wooden, comes running up and he goes, what are you doing? And she's like, and he's in back there, freaking out in the cave. And she's like, I can't get him to come out. He's hallucinating. And he goes, hey buddy, you want to come out? And he's like, no, I'm not coming out. And he goes, I got a peanut butter cookie. And he goes, you have a cookie? Okay, I'm coming out. And so he coaxes him out with a peanut butter cookie. And and they become fast friends.
Because he's got the cookie. Hilarious.
But even from that point forward, like getting him back and got him sleep, and then he wasn't hallucinating anymore. And then him and Wooden have been friends ever since. Wooden's paced him at MOAB. So like, and crewed for him. So they became fast friends after that experience. But that's an example of like, if you don't manage yourself early, it catches up to you later. The little mistakes.
Yeah,
right?
That's like straight experience, right?
Yeah. And knowing yourself. Some people need more sleep. Some people can get by on less. Some people can fall asleep anywhere. Some people need like a specific routine to get themselves down because their brain won't shut down, and that kind of thing. But that's very unique to 200 plus distance, right? In 100 milers, you're going straight through. It's one night, except at Hard Rock, it's 2 nights for the back of the pack because it's a 48-hour cutoff. So there's 2 nights out. But and every once in a while in 100, people will take short little power nap in the middle of the night, 20, 40 minutes, to get themselves kind of back on track if caffeine's not working. But that's more for the middle of the back of the pack. Up front, we're not stopping at all. We don't rest. We just run straight through.
What's the next race that you're preparing for?
I'm doing the Rocky Mountain Slam. So it is, I did Bighorn in June. I did Hard Rock in July. And then I have Wasatch 100 and Bear 100 3 weeks apart in September. So about another 7 weeks.
Damn, Jeff. So with all of these accomplishments in running, being an absolute legend out there, dude, like, I just gotta say the mindset, and like I'll tell people, I'm working out every day. I'm waking up before 5 a.m. on some days, and people will just look at me and be like, why? I cannot imagine how many times you've gotten the why. And I can only think, man, that it's just deep inside of you. So do you have another running goal in mind that you're working towards, or maybe you want to run a 300-mile race? You want to see like how far you can get? What's your mindset going forward after completing all these
Well,
things?
I'm definitely taking another crack at the 200 plus.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking another crack at the 200 plus. I signed up for Cocodona 250 here in Arizona in May. Big 250-mile race that starts way down in Black Canyon City and works the way up and finishes in downtown Flagstaff. I ran the 125 this last year. They had an inaugural 125. They're adding other distances to the race week of 250. So they added a 125 and like a 36 miler. And I did the 125. So like for me, I'm just at this point, I'm just racking up kind of career stats, 40 plus ultra wins. I'm at 2,900-mile wins, and I'm trying to get, trying to obviously get to 30 as a minimum. I'm second in the world for 100-mile wins right now. Carl Meltzer is way ahead of me. He's got like 47 wins, but he was winning back when like it wasn't as competitive as it is today. The sport's grown so much in the last decade. It's gotten way more competitive. So it's harder to get wins. But he's got like such a huge stat, as far as a record goes, it's probably untouchable. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I can keep plugging away for the next decade.
I think you're going to keep plugging away, man.
I'll try.
I would love to see you in action, man. So hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, let me know if you're ever in Flagstaff. We'll get on a trail.
For sure. Jeff, thank you so much, man. And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you, everybody, for watching and tuning in. Jeff.
Giddy up.
Giddy up.